Well, a very good evening to you. I do believe that you had a wonderful day and just in time for the insight here on Lookuptv on a day that President William Ruto officially jetted from Atlanta, Georgia to Washington, D.C. And of course, we'll be talking about his visit to the United States and what it means for the country now that he'll be expected, or rather when he's expected to hold talks with President Joe Biden. That is tomorrow. Now that, among many other stories we prepared for you tonight, first of all, let's have a look at what's making headlines.
Tonight on The Insight, President William Ruto takes on day 3 of his USA tour, and we tell you what this historic visit means for Kenya. No compensation for farmers' crops and livestock destroyed by floods due to financial constraints, says Agriculture CS Mithika Linturi. And Maimayu landslide victims decry dismantling of their camps with no guarantee of being properly resettled.
Welcome to the program. I am Ian Keitani and our sign language interpreter is Justin Oak. Remember, you can watch this bulletin live on our Facebook and YouTube pages at Lookuptv. We kickstart our bulletin now, and President William Ruto has called on more investors to set up stations in Kenya. Speaking in Atlanta, Georgia, Ruto highlighted the strategic location and key infrastructure that separates Kenya from other African countries that makes it more suitable for investment.
President William Ruto's U.S. tour today entered its third day, the head of state touching base in Washington, D.C., ahead of several meetings including congressional engagements. His visit expected to culminate with bilateral talks with President Joe Biden. In his second day, the head of state and America's ambassador to Kenya highlighted the need for investors to consider Kenya, with Whitman emphasizing on Kenya's democracy and friendly business environment.
We have made tremendous investment to develop a modern, efficient, and seamless integrated transport, communication, and energy infrastructure. Our excellent network of ports, railways, roads, and airports reinforce Kenya's position as the gateway to East, Central, and Southern Africa.
Kenya is the most stable democracy in East Africa. The president has created a business environment where he wants Kenya to be the most competitive place to make your investments in business. And he understands that it's not just competing against other African countries. Kenya has to compete against the world.
President Ruto, in pitching for Kenya, noted the emphasis laid on technological advances, insisting that it strategically positions Kenya as ripe for investment.
We are enhancing our technology ecosystem to attract big tech companies and startups, positioning Kenya as the premier destination in our continent. Our digital superhighway program involves laying another 100,000 kilometers of fiber optic infrastructure and establishing numerous digital hubs across the country.
U.S. beverage Coca-Cola is expected to invest millions of dollars in an agreement signed with Kenya, with President Ruto calling on more American companies to set up shops in the country.
Our intention is to ensure that companies like Amazon Web Services, Apple, Citigroup, Coca-Cola, and this afternoon we signed an investment program with Coca-Cola of $175 million over the next 5 years, including Del Monte, General Electric, Google, Hello Tractor, IBM, Intel, Kentegra, MasterCard, Microsoft, Oracle. Do I need to continue? All of them are among many companies that we guarantee maximum value for their investors by realizing the full benefits of working from Kenya, working in Kenya, and working with Kenyans.
The head of state's entourage also made its way to Vivo Fashion, a fashion shop run by Kenyans, the commander-in-chief saying that the company demonstrates the impact of visionary enterprise and spotlights the role of women in leadership, business, and entrepreneurship. Ian Keitani, Lookuptv.
Well, indeed, it's a no-brainer that U.S. Ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, has been on the forefront in pitching for Kenya and calling on investors to, of course, come to Kenya and invest, terming Kenya as the beacon of democracy, not only in East Africa, but also in Africa. Now, this particular evening, joining me to, of course, talk more and, of course, engage us on the president's tour to the United States and what it means is Mr. Gideon Kashola. Very good evening to you, sir.
Thank you, Ian, for the opportunity to have this conversation as far as the president's visit to U.S. is concerned.
Okay, beg your pardon, by the way, Gideon Kashola.
Kashola, yes.
Of course, the CEO of African Center for Diplomatic Affairs. Now, let's just get straight into it. First of all, what is the significance of this particular visit, it being almost 2 decades since a Kenyan president was invited by the sitting president of the United States?
Well, Ian, all this is about the state interest. Always, every state has its interest in every particular aspect of life or sectors within countries run. Therefore, the U.S. president inviting Kenyan president to the White House, there are only 2 things. America is advancing their own interest. Kenya is there to advance our own interest. So it is a win-win situation for both, but I would say it's a much bigger win for Kenya. Now,
let's get to the nitty-gritties. One of the things that President William Ruto is expected to, hold conversations, surrounding, is expected to hold a conversation surrounding the Haiti deployment mission with, President Joe Biden. This is a mission that was, okayed by the UN Security Council. Now, there's been a debate surrounding whether, it was the right move for Kenya. As well, there's been the debate surrounding the funding because, in as much as the U.S. has pledged around $300 million US, there's still questions regarding funding into that particular mission. And as well, 1,000 police officers. Are those officers enough? But before you respond to it as well, because I want you to talk about it as a whole. There's also the issue of the government being accused of disregarding court orders in terms of the police deployment.
Well, it's a very interesting conversation around Haiti and the situation in Haiti. Number one, Haiti is purely now the security aspect of Haiti is manned by the police. They do not have the army. You remember in 1994, while Rwanda was falling, the world was accused for standing by and watching. The question here, and that's why Kofi Annan came up with the idea of responsibility, the concept of responsibility to protect. We can stand by as global citizens as Haiti is falling. So one, Kenya offered, well, this is a problem, there's a challenge facing Haiti and Haitians. We must take action. So Kenya voluntarily accepted to take action and go there. Then the UN Security Council decided, well, if Kenya is going, they got to have a plan. They got to have a contingency plan. They got to have a backup should anything happen. So that is when UN Security Council decided to have a debate over this and came up with the resolution that now incorporated other nations to go into Haiti. It sometimes appears like Kenya is going to Haiti alone. No. The global north have police officers going to Haiti. The global south have police officers going to Haiti. In fact, in Kenya, I know of Kenya, in Africa, I know of Kenya, Benin, and Chad, who are contributing police officers. Remember, in Haiti, they only have 5,000 police officers. With the population that is there, 5,000 police, and that is why they even requested initially that they need backup to ensure law and order is maintained. One thing that is not known to many is that there is what we call track 1 diplomacy and track 2 diplomacy. Track 1 diplomacy is when government and government engages. Track 2 diplomacy is when non-governmental agencies and non-state actors from country A negotiates with non-state actors from country B. Kenyan non-state actors have been in communication with the gang in Haiti. and they have agreed on the modalities. Remember, Kenya would have not gone to Haiti or cannot go to Haiti when the gang says no. So even up to now, unknown to many, the gang have agreed, led by their gang leader, have agreed that, well, come, let us find a solution to what is happening, because they also need a solution. Over 65%, according to research firms in America and in Haiti, over 65% of Haitians now want external intervention to save the situation. So it is not wrong to go there. We, Kenya being part of the global society, cannot afford to stand by as they watch. But again, you asked about is the money aspect. Well, the money aspect is a key issue. But remember, security issues, security budgets are not for public consumption. They are left for security. They are never disclosed. For example, in Kenya, you will only be told 1 billion shillings has been allocated to KDF, for example, but you'll never get that breakdown. You will never know what goes where.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk a little bit about trade. Now, for example, in 2022, the United States exported goods worth $604 million to the country, and imported goods worth around $875 million from Kenya. Now, in terms of trade, the U.S. is sort of trying again to want to say neutralize the impact of probably Russia and China, which again, China is one of the countries that you want to say gets more imports, or Kenya gets more imports from China as it stands. Now, this particular meeting between President Joe Biden and President William Ruto, would you term it as a meeting aimed at as well neutralizing the inroads made by China and probably Russia?
Yeah, well, I won't talk of neutralizing. I will talk of advancement of interest, and in a bigger picture, looking at opportunity to convince Kenya that, well, in the past you might have looked east, but we are your sure bet. For instance, you've just stated the trade volumes between Kenya and US. There's the trade volume also between Kenya and China. As it is, if you check with Kenya Invest, you will realize that what Kenya imports from China is much more than what Kenya exports to China. And how then do we get our even currency more stable and strong against other competing currencies? It's when we have more exports than imports. Kenya going to US and having a trade discussion is more beneficial to Kenya. Remember, the president has had quite a number of engagements from one of the leading beverage companies, Coca-Cola, and they're going to invest over 230 billion Kenyan shillings over 5 years, and that money is going into operations. So meaning Kenya is going to have more advantage in job creation, in dealing with SMEs, because Coca-Cola deals with SMEs, it deals with youth organization. Like there's one called Kuza Kazi that works in Nyeri, has now extended to Kericho, Migori, Kisii, and all that. So that is already job creation to reduce the imbalance in what we will call as unemployment bulge.
Now, fair enough. The visit by President Ruto to the United States comes at a time when the United States rather is preparing itself to go to the polls. How will the elections, or the outcome of the November elections, how would it affect the relationship between Kenya and the United States? Because as it stands, according to polls and all that, it looks like former President Donald Trump is ahead of the current president in terms of polls that we have as of now.
One thing we must know about United States and their elections, what affects their election outcome is majorly their foreign policy, the foreign policies of either sitting president or an aspiring president. That is what majorly influences their election. Today, what will really carry the day in the US is the war between Russia and Ukraine, the war in Gaza. Those are some of the things that will heavily influence that election. I don't think Kenya having trade deals and more other deals with the US can easily influence the election, because again, the Americans are more focused into foreign policy, and that is what I so far believe will influence that.
Now, again, the United States, its key selling point has been, democracy delivers. But in Africa, that seems to be, diluted, if for lack of a better term, because, for example, in West Africa, there have been coups left, right, and center, and most recently, the junta in Niger ordered U.S. forces out of, the country. Now, question is, does the United States look at, President William Ruto in terms of, because Kenya has been termed as a beacon of democracy, does the United States and President Joe Biden look at President William Ruto as, an antidote to the current situation within Africa? Because as it stands, Russia again and China are looking like, they're getting more influence on Africa compared to the United States.
Well, the reason why Kenya, or the reason as to why China is getting more and more inroad into Africa is because their donation or their allocations to Africa as far as donation is concerned is not attached to anything. It's about business, give and take. But for the United States, most of their donations, so to say, are attached to democratic tenets. And that is why for a long time, or for the last few 10 or 20 years, China has gotten into Africa, and they are coming with visible goodies. America would prefer having other things as far as democracy and is concerned. But that is not China. China doesn't care about your democracy. All they care is trade. So I don't think, as at now, that America would want to say they are competing China. But again, I don't think that America is viewing Ruto as the antidote, but they are viewing Kenya per se as a state that can be their mouthpiece silently within the continent. Remember, in Kenya has one of the most foremost frontrunners for AU seat, and with the AU you got to control a lot of issues as the AU Commission Chair. You got to talk to heads of state, you can influence one or two. So where is American interest in today? They're looking at who can try and run around Africa, and their interest through that person is served, even if it is not the country at large, but someone who can run their interest within the region.
Now, finally, at some point in time last year, President William Ruto hosted the now fallen, Iran President Ibrahim Raisi, and that, of course, brought some sort of dismay from the United States, because thereafter again he hosted the Foreign Minister for Russia, Mr. Sergei Lavrov, and again in October he flew to Beijing for a 3-day state visit. Now, the president dismissed the suggestion that is a darling of the West, and in fact, in his own words, he said this is not about taking sides. It's about interests. There is absolutely no contradiction to work with different countries. It's just common sense. Now, finally, I just want to, from where you sit, I want to pick your mind on the decision by the Speaker of the House to, reject the request by the Democrats to, have President William Ruto address the Congress. Would you attribute that to, local politics, because as well the Speaker belongs to, the Republican?
It's a very interesting conversation, but reading in one of the international journals, they said due to the timelines and all that, they could not host the president for that particular function. But one thing you can be sure about, once the president has that state visit, it's now much more easier for him for next time to be invited for that particular occasion. I think even when he was invited, I'm not very certain, but I want to believe that when he was invited, that was not part of the itinerary. It came as a second thought.
Now, Mr. Goro, just 30 seconds. What do you expect from the bilateral talks that will be held between President William Ruto?
Too much. already Kenya is winning in this thing. Over 404 million for education for 60 students to go to America and study there. Over 23 billion for Coca-Cola coming in. Over we have the defense that will also win bigly.
Then signed a deal yesterday with
oh
CDC.
Yes, remember, just a second, remember 41% of all deaths in Kenya are caused by non-communicable diseases, and that alone, KEMRI and having a negotiation or a deal with the CDC is one of the best things that happens to the health sector. And finally, PEPFAR. How many Kenyans die of HIV every year? 18,000. How many new infections? 22,000. How many Kenyans live with HIV? 1.4 million. So that alone tells you the gain Kenya will get when it comes to the health sector.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gordon Kachola, for your insights this particular evening. Of course, Kenyans will be looking forward to what the president will come back with from the United States. Now, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, on that note, we just take a brief break. We'll be back with more news items on this bulletin. Don't go away.
Kipindi ni ukulima ni mali na manjoro. Kumbuka hapa ndipo unajifunza mambo mengi kuhusu ukulima. Kilimo ni uti wa mgongo wa nchi, na ukiwa na njoro unajifunza. Kumbuka, angalia mwenyewe. Tunakuambia ukitaka kujua tips za ukulima, ungana na sisi kwenye Lookuptv. Every Sunday unatukuta pale saa 10, tunakuonesha kuhusu ukulima. Ukulima wa mimea, ukulima wa ng'ombe, ukulima wa kuku, ukulima wa mbuzi na yote ambayo yanahusiana na ukulima. Kumbuka nini? Kipindi ni ukulima ni mali.
Leo tunazungumzia swala la ufisadi ambalo limekuwa likiangaziwa kwa muda sasa. Wenyeji wanasema hili kuhusiana na ufisadi, wanasema kwamba imewaangamiza, wengine wanasema kwamba iliwapa nafasi ya kuweza kuingia katika sehemu mbalimbali.
So we have to accept the fact that people work hard outside here. It is not a corruption alone that can make you thrive. Scrap off that mentality in you.
And the degree of personality cult in ladies compared to men is very high. Ladies, they believe that things will be better without working for that thing.
Sasa tumegrow tukiwa nayo hivyo. Sasa hii ni culture, ni norm.
Some of even these government appointees, wale ambao wana occupy zile spaces, they are there because of how close were you to the whoever person when you're in power. So this is a norm that should be broken.
My brother, I think at some point corruption is good.
I don't agree.
Yeah.
Let's continue with our bulletin now on agriculture. CS Mithika Linturi has stated that the government will not be providing compensation for farmers whose crops and livestock were affected by the recent floods. Speaking before the Senate plenary session, Linturi clarified that there is no budgetary allocation set aside for compensating farmers impacted by floods. Martin Masharia tells us more.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Appearing before the Senate plenary session today, Linturi made it clear that the government has not set aside a budgetary allocation for compensation of farmers affected by the floods. Linturi further explained that the government is unable to fully assess the extent of the damage caused by the floods until the rains subside.
The government's emergency response to the emergencies occasioned by floods does not include compensation to crop and livestock farmers affected by floods. The government has no budgetary allocation for the purpose of compensation of farmers affected by the floods, and it is worth noting that Tana River County is also affected by floods resulting from the enhanced rainfall in those months of April again and May, and this is the season we are in, and it is not possible to pronounce ourselves on the level of damage caused by the floods as at now, because the rains are still ongoing, and it is not possible to do a report to inform on the level of losses incurred.
During the session, Senator Esther Okenyori raised concerns about the significant impact of the floods on Tana River County. In response, Linturi pledged to collaborate with various insurance to explore ways to assist those severely affected by the floods.
We have a program on crop insurance within the ministry, and some of the issues that probably we go through trying to argue to ensure that our farmers are properly taken care of.
Despite the lack of compensation for flood-affected farmers, Linturi assured that the coffee sector farmers' debts will be settled. He disclosed that the Ministry of Cooperatives and the Treasury have prepared a memo to clear all outstanding debts in the sector, allocating 6 billion towards this initiative.
Next cabinet meeting, the ministry, my ministry and Ministry of Cooperatives, we've already prepared a memo to seek approval to waive 6 billion debt for all coffee farmers in the country.
Martin Masharia, Lookuptv.
Now, victims of the Maimahiu landslide tragedy have raised concerns over their fate after the government began dismantling their IDP camps. The victims now say they are yet to receive appropriate guidance, with the government pledging to give rental support to those whose homes were completely wrecked. Sonia Njiru with the details.
Displaced persons in the Maimahiu landslide tragedy have expressed uncertainty following the government's directive to dismantle IDP camps, stating that there is not enough guidance offered by the government regarding their future.
Wenye wamebaki hapa ni wale wenye shamba ama wenye ploti. Hao ndio wameambiwa watatafuta nao nyumba, watalentiwa nyumba kwa miezi 3. Chakula tunaona pale, endapo utapewa kama wale wengine walikuwa kukomboa unga ni kama 2, sukari, chakula tu ya kuweza kusukuma mtu kama miezi 2 hivi. Sasa shida ama swali ile mtu anajiuliza, kuanzia hapo maisha itakuwaje, na hatuambii kwamba ni mpaka lini ama hii mpango itapangika namna gani. Hizo ndizo wasiwasi tuko nazo.
The Maimahiu Disaster Management Committee has requested families whose homes remain intact to return to their homes, a situation which has evoked fear and panic in them if the rains still continue.
Tulikuwa tunaenda kwa ground na chifu na wanakijiji, lakini kuanzia jana chifu alikuja huku na akatutaja tukiwa watu 10, akasema tutoke hapa turudi kwetu kwenye tulikuwa kwa maji, na bado nyumba zetu siko tu kwa mto. Naoga sana kurudi hapo, huwezi rudi juu hata sahi, hata ukienda ukae tu kwa hiyo nyumba, hata kunyesha mchana unatoroka, kunyesha usiku unatoroka, utakaanje kutoroka. Sasa sisi tunaomba tu serikali itusaidie pahali tutatulia mpaka hii maji iishe, ama watwambie tutafanya aje na hizo plot zetu.
Furthermore, the government has urged those severely affected to look for rental accommodation, further promising to cater for food and rent worth 5,000 Kenya shillings for 3 months, an offer that the IDPs claim is not enough sustenance.
Tumepatiwa 2 weeks. Kila mtu ajipange, aende tafute nyumba, aoneshane, ndio aende lipiwe 3 months na upewe chakula na upewe 5,000, alafu tuondoke. Je, swali ni moja. Tunajiuliza aje, tunaenda kiaje? Tunaenda wapi? Tutafikisha wapi na hii maisha? Hii maisha ni ngumu. Hata nikipewa hiyo 5 months, nilipewa nyumba 5 months, ama nipewe chakula, ama nipewe 5,000, itanisaidia na nini? Na nitaanzia wapi? Bado maisha ni ngumu bado. Sasa sisi tunaomba tu, yani kama ndiyo shamba tuliambiliwa, tujue venye tutanunua shamba. Yani ukitoka hapa uwe na green light, unaenda wapi? Utamalizia wapi? Utaanza maisha aje? Juu ni ngumu sana. Sasa unaona, sasa ndio tulikuwa tunasema je, Kiara angekuja angetuelezea mambo ya serikali venye kuna sisi hatuwezi jua venye serikali inafikiria, lakini tungeomba sana watufikirie sana.
Sonia Njiru, Lookuptv.
Now, 7 schools in Meiti, Isiolo County are yet to open due to severe damage caused by the floods in the classrooms and the sanitation blocks. Education stakeholders have now come together to ensure that the affected students are accommodated in neighboring schools. Parents are now calling on authorities to speed up reconstruction efforts.
This is the situation in Merti, Isiolo sub-county. Schools were left in ruins after Wasunyiro River broke its banks. 7 schools, according to the report presented in the meeting of education stakeholders and leaders of the area, are in bad situation after important infrastructures were damaged by the waters. The Ministry of Education has ordered closure of schools for the safety of students, while the ministry is said to come up with an ample solution.
Have already submerged. We are now requesting the national government, NGOs, to come in and intervene in the situation. Otherwise, I don't see whether we can even go back there the whole time.
Elsewhere, 1,400 students in Samburu and Marsabit counties who are greatly affected by drought situation have found reprieve after Kenya Dryland Education Fund gave them food and school fees. Kenya Dryland Education Fund Country Director Ahmed Kura noted that the organization seeks to ensure that the needy students get fair chance at acquiring education.
The pastoralist communities have suffered because of no rain, with their livestock dwindling, and if the livestock dying, many families cannot afford school fees. And this is why Kenya Drylands Education Fund started the Food for Fees program. And in this, our goal is to help these institutions, 1,400 students, to stay in school. Many families are struggling and cannot afford fees. As KDF, we decided to ensure that these kids are not sent away from the institution. Education is important to our people, and it's the only thing that can bring us out of the poverty that we are in right now.
Majid Hussein, Lookuptv.
Well, that story by Majid Hussein brings us to the end of this particular bulletin. But remember, we'll be keeping tabs with President William Ruto's visit to the United States, as he is expected to hold bilateral talks with President Joe Biden tomorrow at the White House, right in Washington, D.C. Now, do have yourself a wonderful night, and like always, God bless.